Six.
And howdy, everyone. Welcome to the word number 226. Howdy, Glenna. Howdy, Lynn. Howdy, Matt. Okay. Okay, we are continuing in Jasher, which we'll be reading from this website. If you have a book, you can read from that. If you don't have a book, you can maybe read along with us. We're going to start in chapter 76 of Jasher, go through 77, 78, 79, and 80. So just a reminder, 76 through 80. Anybody got anything spectacular going on today? Welcome everybody in chat. Look at that. We got covered from France to California today. Yeah, I know. Awesome, huh?
Bonjour.
And that, so, okay, if nobody else has anything, let's go ahead and pray in. That is, there we go. Heavenly Father, thank you very much for bringing us together today for this fellowship and learning and reading. We're very grateful that you've called us to be your sons and daughters, and that you've brought everybody here together for fellowship. We thank you for that. We would ask for you to pour out your spirit of knowledge and discernment on everybody here now and in the future to get the message that you need. And we would ask your healing touch on those that are still fighting these cold weather doldrums, and restore them to full health. For those that are traveling today, we ask your coverage and protection over them, and get them to their next destination safely, please. Thank you, Father. In Jesus Yeshua's name, amen. All righty. Hang on a second. Hang on. Let's go like that. And then I'm going to go over here to that. And let's see. We'll start with chapter 76. And go, Matt.
All right. And Moses, the son of Amram, was still king in the land of Cush in those days. And he prospered in his kingdom, and he conducted the government of his children of Cush in justice, righteousness, and integrity. And all the children of Cush loved Moshe all the days that he reigned over them. All the inhabitants of the land of Cush were greatly afraid of him. And in the 14th year of his reign, of the reign of Moshe over Cush, Moshe was sitting on the royal throne, while Adonai, the queen, was before him. Adonai, the queen, was before him, and all the nobles were sitting around him. And Adonai, the queen, said before the king and the princes, "What is this thing which you, the children of Cush, have done for this long time? Surely you know that there are 40 years that this man has reigned over Cush. He has not approached me, nor has he served the Elohim of the children of Cush. Now therefore, hear, O ye children of Cush, and let this man no more reign over you, as he is not our flesh. Behold, Menicrus, the son, is grown up. Let him reign over you, for it is better for you to serve the son of the Lord than to serve a stranger, slave of the king of Mitzrayim." And all the people of the nobles of the children of Cush heard the words which Adonai, the queen, had spoken in the ears. And all the people were preparing unto the evening. And in the morning they rose up early and made Menicrus, son of Caneus, king over them. And all the children of Cush were afraid to stretch forth their hand against Moshe, for Yahuwah was with Moshe. And the children of Cush remembered the oath which they swore unto Moshe. Therefore they did not do harm to him. But the children of Cush gave many presents to Moshe, and sent him from them with great honor of Cush, and went home and ceased to reign over Cush. And Moshe was 66 years old when he went out of the land of Cush, for this thing was from Yahuwah. For the period had arrived which he had appointed in the days of the of old, to bring forth Israel from the affliction of the children of Cham. So Moshe went to Midian, for he was afraid to return to Mitzrayim on account of Pharaoh. And he went and sat at the well of the water in Midian. And the 7 daughters of Reuel the Midian went out to feed their father's flock. And they came to the well and drew water to water their father's flock. So the shepherds of Midian came and drove them away. And Moshe rose up and helped them and watered the flock. And they came home to their father Reuel and told him what Moshe did for them. And they said, a Mitzi man delivered us from the hands of the shepherds, and he drew up water from us and watered the flock. And Reuel said to his daughters, and where is he? Wherefore have you left the man? And Reuel sent for him and fetched him and brought him home. And he ate bread with him. And Moshe related to Reuel that he had fled from Mitzrayim, and that he had reigned 40 years over Cush, and that he had afterward had taken the government from him, and had sent him away in peace and honor with presents. And when Reuel had heard the words of Moshe, Reuel said within himself, I will put this man into the prison house, whereby I shall conciliate the children of Cush, for he has fled from them. And they took and put him into the prison house, and Moshe was in prison 10 years. And while Moshe was in the prison house, Zipporah, the daughter of Reuel, took pity over him and supported him with bread and water all the time. And the children of Israel were yet in the land of Mitzrayim, serving the Mitzrayim in all manner of hard work. And the hand of the Mitzrayim continued in severity over the children of Israel in those days. And at that time Yahuwah smote Pharaoh, the king of Mitzrayim, and he afflicted with plague of leprosy from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Owing to the cruel treatment of the children of Israel was this plague at that time from Yahuwah upon Pharaoh, the king of Mitzrayim. For Yahuwah had hearkened unto the prayer of the children of Israel, and the cry reached him on account of their hard work. Still his anger did not turn from them, and the hand of Pharaoh was still stretched out against the children of Israel, and Pharaoh hardened his neck before Yahuwah. And he increased his yoke over the children of Israel, and embittered their lives with all manner of hard work. And Yahuwah had inflicted the plague upon Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim. He asked his wise men and sorcerers to cure him. And his wise men and sorcerers said unto him, that if the blood of little children were put into the wounds, he would be healed. And Pharaoh hearkened to them, and set his ministers to Goshen to the children of Israel to take their children. And Pharaoh's ministers went and took the infants of the children of Israel from the bosoms of their mothers by force, and they brought them to Pharaoh daily, a child each day, and the physicians killed them and applied them to the plague. Thus did they all the days. And the number of the children which Pharaoh slew was 375. But Yahuwah hearkened not to the physicians and the king of Mitzrayim, and the plague went on increasing mightily, and Pharaoh was 10 years afflicted with that plague. Still the heart of Pharaoh was more hardened against the children of Israel, and at the end of the 10 years Yahuwah continued to afflict Pharaoh with destructive plagues, and Yahuwah smote him in a bad tumor and sickness at the stomach, and the plague turned to a severe boil. At that time 2 ministers of Pharaoh came from the land of Goshen, where all the children of Israel were, and went to the house of Pharaoh, and said to him, We have seen the children of Israel slacken in their work and negligent in their labor. And when Pharaoh had heard the words of his ministers, his anger was kindled against the children of Israel exceedingly, for he was greatly grieved at his bodily pain. And he answered and said, Now the children of Israel know that I am ill. They turn and scoff at us. Now therefore harness my chariot for me, and I will betake up myself to Goshen, and I will see the scoff of the children of Israel, which they are derading me. So his servants harnessed the chariot for him, and they took and made him ride upon a horse, for he was not able to ride of himself. And he took with him 10 horsemen and 10 footmen, and went to the children of Israel to Goshen. And when he had come to the border of Mitzrayim, the king's horse passed into the narrow place, elevated in a hollow part of the vineyard, fenced on both sides, the low plain country being on the other side. And the horses ran rapidly in that place and pressed each other, and other horses pressed the king's horses. And the king's horse fell into the low plain while the king was riding upon it. And when he fell, the chariot turned over the king's face, and the horse lay upon the king. And the king cried out, for his flesh was very sore. And the flesh of the king was torn from him, and his bones were broken, and he could not ride. For this thing was from Yahuwah to him. For Yahuwah had heard the cries of the people of the children of Israel and their affliction, and his servants carried him upon the shoulders a little at a time, and they brought him back to Mitzrayim. And the horsemen who were with him came also back to Mitzrayim, and they placed him in his bed, and the king knew that his end was come to die. So Apparinth, the queen, his woman, came and cried before the king, and the king wept a great weeping with her. And all his nobles and servants came on that day and saw the king that in that affliction, and wept a great weeping for him. And the princes of the king and all his counselors advised the king to cause one to reign in his stead in the land, whomsoever he should choose from his sons. And the king had 3 sons, 2 daughters, which Apparinth, the queen, his woman, had borne to him, besides the king's children of concubines. And these were their names: the firstborn, Orithri; the second, Adikam; and the third, Morion. And their sisters' names of the elder, Bathia; and of the other, Akuzi; and Orithi. The firstborn of the king was an idiot, precipitate, and hurried in his words. But Adakim was a cunning and wise man, knowing in all wisdom of Mitzrayim, but of unseemly aspect, thick in flesh, and very short in stature. His height was 1 cubit. And when the king saw Adakim, his son, intelligent and wise in all things, the king resolved that he should be king in his stead after his death. And he took for him a woman, Gedudah, daughter of Abilat, and he was 10 years old, and she bore unto him 4 sons. And he afterwards went and took 3 women, and begot 8 sons and 3 daughters. And the disorder greatly prevailed over the king, and his flesh stank like flesh of a carcass cast upon the field in summertime during the heat of sun. And when the king saw that his sickness had greatly strengthened itself over him, he ordered his son Adakim to be brought to him, and they made him king over the land in his place. And at the end of 3 years, the king died in shame, disgrace, disgust, and his servants carried him and buried him in the sepulchre of the kings of Mitzrayim in Tisan Mitzrayim. But they embalmed him not, as was usual with kings, for his flesh was putrid, and they could not approach to embalm him on account of the stench. So they buried him in haste, for this evil was from Yahuwah to him, and Yahuwah had requited him evil to evil, which in his days he had done to Israel. And he cried with terror and with shame, and his son Adakim reigned in his place.
Chapter 77. Adakim was 20 years old when he reigned over Egypt. He reigned 4 years. In the 206th year of Israel's going down to Egypt did Adakim reign over Egypt. But he continued not so long in his reign over Egypt as his fathers had continued their reigns. For Malol, his father, reigned 94 years in Egypt, but he was 10 years sick and died, for he had been wicked before the Lord. And all the Egyptians called the name of Adakim Pharaoh, like the name of his fathers, as was their custom to do in Egypt. And all the wise men of Pharaoh called the name of Adakim Ahuz, for short is called Ahuz in the Egyptian language. He was very short. And Adakim was exceedingly ugly, and he was a cubit and a span, and he had a great beard which reached to the soles of his feet. And Pharaoh sat upon his father's throne to reign over Egypt, and he conducted the government of Egypt in his wisdom. And whilst he reigned, he exceeded his father and all the preceding kings in wickedness, and he increased his yoke over the children of Israel. And he went with his servants to Goshen to the children of Israel, and he strengthened the labor over them, and he said unto them, complete your work each day's task, and let not your hands slacken from our work from this day forward, as you did in the days of my father. And he placed officers over them from amongst the children of Israel, and over these officers he placed taskmasters from amongst his servants. And he placed over them a measure of bricks for them to do according to that number, day by day, and he turned back and went to Egypt. At that time, the taskmasters of Pharaoh ordered the officers of the children of Israel according to the command of Pharaoh, saying, thus says Pharaoh, do your work each day and finish your task and observe the daily measure of bricks, diminish not anything. And it shall come to pass that if you are deficient in your daily bricks, I will put your young children in their stead. And the taskmasters of Egypt did so in those days as Pharaoh had ordered them. And whenever any deficiency was found in the children of Israel's measure of their daily bricks, the taskmasters of Pharaoh would go to the wives of the children of Israel and take infants of the children of Israel to the number of bricks deficient. They would take them by force from their mothers' laps and put them in the building instead of the bricks, whilst their fathers and mothers were crying over them and weeping when they heard the weeping voices of their infants in the wall of the building. And the taskmasters prevailed over Israel, that the Israelites should place their children in the building, so that a man placed his son in the wall and put mortar over him, while his eyes wept over him and his tears ran down upon his child. And the taskmasters of Egypt did so to the babes of Israel for many days, and no one pitied or had compassion over the babes of the children of Israel. And the number of all the children killed in the building was 270, some whom they had built upon instead of the bricks which had been left deficient by their fathers, and some whom they had drawn out dead from the building. And the labor imposed upon the children of Israel in the days of Edom exceeded in hardship that which they performed in the days of his father. And the children of Israel sighed every day on account of their heavy work, for they had said to themselves, behold, when Pharaoh shall die, his son will rise up and lighten our work. But they increased the latter work more than the former, and the children of Israel sighed at this, and their cry ascended to God on account of their labor. And God heard the voice of the children of Israel and their cry in those days, and God remembered to them his covenant which he had made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And God saw the burden of the children of Israel and their heavy work in those days, and he determined to deliver them. And Moses, the son of Amram, was still confined in the dungeon in those days in the house of Reuel, the Midianite, and Zipporah, the daughter of Reuel, did support him with food secretly day by day. And Moses was confined in the dungeon in the house of Reuel for 10 years. And at the end of 10 years, which was the first year of the reign of Pharaoh over Egypt, in the place of his father, Zipporah said to her father Reuel, no person inquires or seeks after the Hebrew man, whom thou didst bind in prison now 10 years. Now therefore, if it seem good in thy sight, let us send and see whether he is living or dead. But her father knew not that she had supported him. And Reuel, her father, answered and said to her, has ever such a thing happened that a man should be shut up in a prison without food for 10 years, and that he should live? And Zipporah answered her father, saying, surely thou hast heard that the God of the Hebrews is great and awful, and does wonders for them at all times. He it was who delivered Abraham from Ur of the Chaldeans, and Isaac from the sword of his father, and Jacob from the angel of the Lord who wrestled with him at the ford of Jabbok? Also with this man has he done many things. He delivered him from the river in Egypt, and from the sword of Pharaoh, and from the children of Cush. So also can he deliver him from famine and make him live. And the thing seemed good in the sight of Ruel, and he did according to the word of his daughter, and sent to the dungeon to ascertain what became of Moses. And he saw, and behold, the man Moses was living in the dungeon, standing upon his feet, praising and praying to the God of his ancestors. And Ruel commanded Moses to be brought out of the dungeon. So they shaved him, and he changed his prison garments and ate bread. And afterward Moses went into the garden of Ruel, which was behind the house, and he there prayed to the Lord his God, who had done mighty wonders for him. And it was that whilst he prayed, he looked opposite to him, and behold, a sapphire stick was placed in the ground, which was planted in the midst of the garden. And he approached the stick, and he looked, and behold, the name of the Lord God of hosts was engraved thereon, written and developed upon the stick. And he read it, and stretched forth his hand, and he plucked it, like a forest tree from the thicket, and the stick was in his hand. And this is the stick with which all the works of our God were performed after he had created heaven and earth, and all the host of them, seas, rivers, and all their fishes. And when God had driven Adam from the Garden of Eden, he took the stick in his hand and went and tilled the ground from which he was taken. And the stick came down to Noah and was given to Shem and his descendants until it came into the hand of Abraham the Hebrew. And when Abraham had given all he had to his son Isaac, he also gave to him this stick. And when Jacob had fled to Paddan Aram, he took it into his hand, and when he returned to his father, he had not left it behind him. Also, when he went down to Egypt, he took it into his hand and gave it to Joseph, one portion above his brethren, for Jacob had taken it by force from his brother Esau. And after the death of Joseph, the nobles of Egypt came into the house of Joseph, and the stick came into the hand of Ruel the Midianite. And when he went out of Egypt, he took it in his hand and planted it in his garden. And all the mighty men of the Kenites tried to pluck it when they endeavored to get Zipporah his daughter, but they were unsuccessful. So that stick remained planted in the garden of Ruel until he came who had a right to it and took it. And when Ruel saw the stick in the hand of Moses, he wondered at it, and he gave him his daughter Zipporah for a wife.
Chapter 78. At that time died Baal-Canaan, the son of Achbor, king of Edom, and he was buried in his house in the land of Edom. And after his death, the children of Esau sent to the land of Edom and took from there a man who was in Edom, whose name was Hadad, and they made him king over them in the place of Baal-Chanaan, their king. And Hadad reigned over the children of Edom 48 years. And when he reigned, he resolved to fight against the children of Moab, to bring them under the power of the children of Esau as they were before. But he was not able, because the children of Moab heard this thing, and they rose up and hastened to elect a king over them from amongst their brethren. And they afterward gathered together a great people and sent to the children of Ammon, their brethren, for help to fight against Hadad, king of Edom. And Hadad heard the things which the children of Moab had done, and was greatly afraid of them, and refrained from fighting against them. In those days Moses, the son of Amram in Midian, took Zipporah, the daughter of Ruel the Midianite, for a wife. And Zipporah walked in the ways of the daughter of Jacob, and she was nothing short of the righteousness of Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah. And Zipporah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Gershom, for she said, I was a stranger in a foreign land. But he circumcised not his foreskin at the command of Ruel, his father-in-law. And she conceived and again bare a son, but circumcised his foreskin, and called his name Eliezer. For Moses said, because the God of my fathers was my help, and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh, king of Egypt, greatly increased the labor of the children of Israel in those days and continued to make his yoke heavier upon the children of Israel. And he ordered a proclamation to be made in Egypt, saying, "Give no more straw to the people to make bricks with. Let them go and gather themselves straw as they can find it. Also the tale of bricks which they shall make, let them give each day, and diminish nothing from them, for they are idle in their work." And the children of Israel heard this, and they moaned and sighed, and they cried unto the Lord on account of the bitterness of their souls. And the Lord heard the cries of the children of Israel, and saw the oppression which the Egyptians oppressed them. And the Lord was jealous of his people and his inheritance, and heard their voice. And he resolved to take them out of the affliction of Egypt, to give them the land of Canaan for a possession.
Jasher chapter 79. And in those days Moses was feeding the flock of Reuel the Midianite, his father-in-law, beyond the wilderness of Sin. And the stick which he took from his father-in-law was in his hand. And it came to pass one day that a kid of goats strayed from the flock, and Moses pursued it and came to the mountain of God, to Horeb. And when he came to Horeb, the Lord appeared there unto him in the bush, and he found the bush burning with fire, but the fire had no power over the bush to consume it. And Moses was greatly astonished at this sight, wherefore the bush was not consumed. And he approached to see this mighty thing. And the Lord called unto Moses out of the fire, and commanded him to go down to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to send the children of Israel from his service. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go, return to Egypt, for all those men who sought thy life are dead, and thou shalt speak unto Pharaoh, and send forth the children of Israel from his land. And the Lord showed him to do signs and wonders in Egypt before the eyes of Pharaoh and the eyes of his subjects, in order that they might believe that the Lord had sent him. And Moses hearkened to all the Lord had commanded him. And he returned to his father-in-law and told him the thing. And Reuel said to him, Go in peace. And Moses rose up to go to Egypt. And he took his wife and sons with him. And he was at an inn in the road. And the angel of God came down and sought an occasion against him. And he wished to kill him on account of his firstborn son, because he had not circumcised him, and had transgressed the covenant which the Lord had made with Abraham. For Moses had hearkened to the words of his father-in-law, which he had spoken to him, not to circumcise his firstborn son. Therefore he circumcised him not. And Zipporah saw the angel of the Lord seeking an occasion against Moses, and she knew that this thing was owing to his not having circumcised her son Gershom. And Zipporah hastened and took of the sharp rock stones that were there, and she circumcised her son, and delivered her husband and her son from the hand of the angel of the Lord. And Aaron, the son of Amram, the brother of Moses, was in Egypt, walking at the riverside on that day. And the Lord appeared to him in that place, and he said to him, Go now toward Moses in the wilderness. And he went and met him in the mountain of God, and he kissed him. And Aaron lifted up his eyes and saw Zipporah, the wife of Moses, and her children. And he said unto Moses, Who are these unto thee? And Moses said unto him, They are my wife and sons, which God gave to me in Midian. And the thing grieved Aaron on account of the woman and her children. And Aaron said to Moses, Send away the woman and her children, that they may go to her father's house. And Moses hearkened to the words of Aaron, and did so. And Zipporah returned with her children, and they went to the house of Reuel, and remained there until the time arrived when the Lord had visited his people, and brought them forth from Egypt from the hand of Pharaoh. And Moses and Aaron came to Egypt to the community of the children of Israel, and they spoke to them all the words of the Lord, and the people rejoiced in exceeding great rejoicing. And Moses and Aaron rose up early the next day, and they went to the house of Pharaoh, and they took in their hands the stick of God. And when they came to the king's gate, 2 young lions were confined there with iron instruments, and no person went out or came in from before them, unless those whom the king ordered to come, when the conjurers came and withdrew the lions by their incantations. And this brought them to the king. And Moses hastened and lifted up the stick upon the lions, and he loosed them. And Moses and Aaron came into the king's house. The lions also came with them in joy, and they followed them and rejoiced as a dog rejoices over his master when he comes from the field. And when Pharaoh saw this thing, he was astonished at it, and he was greatly terrified at the report, for their appearance was like the appearance of the children of God. And Pharaoh said to Moses, "What do you require?" And they answered him, saying, "The Lord God of the Hebrews has sent us to thee, to say, Send forth my people that they may serve me." And when Pharaoh heard their words, he was greatly terrified before them. And he said to them, "Go today and come back to me tomorrow." And they did according to the word of the king. And when they had gone, Pharaoh sent for Balaam the magician, and to Jannes and Jambres his sons, and to all the magicians and conjurers and counselors which belonged to the king. And they all came and sat before the king. And the king told them all the words which Moses and his brother had spoken to him. And the magicians said to the king, "But how came the men to thee on account of the lions which were confined at the gate?" And the king said, "Because they lifted up their rod against the lions and loosed them, and came to me. The lions also rejoiced at them as a dog rejoices to meet his master." And Balaam, the son of Beor, the magician, answered the king, saying, "These are none else than magicians like ourselves. Now therefore send for them, and let them come, and we will try them." And the king did so. And in the morning Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron to come before the king. And they took the rod of God, and they came to the king and spoke to him, saying, "Thus said the Lord God of the Hebrews, Send to my people that they may serve me." And the king said to them, "But who will believe you that you are the messengers of God, and that you were come to me by his order? Now therefore give a wonder or sign in this matter, and then the words which you speak will be believed." And Aaron hastened and threw the rod out of his hand before Pharaoh and before his servants, and the rod turned into a serpent. And the sorcerers saw this, and they cast each man his rod upon the ground, and they became serpents. And the serpent of Aaron's rod lifted up its head and opened its mouth to swallow the rods of the magicians. And Balaam the magician answered and said, "This thing has been from the days of old, that a serpent should swallow its fellow, and that living things devour each other. Now therefore restore it too as a rod as it was at first, and we will also restore our rods as they were at first. And if thy rod shall swallow our rods, then we shall know that the Spirit of God is in thee, and if not, thou art only an artificer like unto ourselves." And Aaron hastened and stretched forth his hand and caught hold of the serpent's tail, and it became a rod in his hand. And the sorcerers did the like with their rods, and they got hold each man of the tail of a serpent, and they became rods as at first. And when they were restored to rods, the rod of Aaron swallowed up their rods. And when the king saw this thing, he ordered the book of records that related to the kings of Egypt to be brought. And they brought the book of records and the chronicles of the kings of Egypt, in which all the idols of Egypt were inscribed. For they thought of finding therein the name of Jehovah, but they found it not. And Pharaoh said to Moses and Aaron, "Behold, I have not found the name of your God written in this book, and his name I knew not." And the counselors and the wise men answered the king, "We have heard that the God of the Hebrews is a son of the wise, the son of ancient kings." And Pharaoh turned to Moses and Aaron and said to them, "I know not the Lord whom you have declared, neither will I send his people." And they answered and said to the king, "The Lord God of gods is his name, and he proclaimed his name over us from the days of our ancestors, and sent us, saying, Go to Pharaoh and say unto him, Send my people that they may serve me. Now therefore send us, that we may take a journey for 3 days in the wilderness, and there may sacrifice to him. And from the days of our going down to Egypt, he has not taken from our hands either a burnt offering, oblation, or sacrifice. And if thou wilt not send us, or his anger will be kindled against thee, and he will smite Egypt either with the plague or with the sword." And Pharaoh said to them, Tell me now his power and his might." And they said to him, He created the heaven and the earth, the seas and all their fishes. He formed the light, created the darkness, caused the rain upon the earth and watered it, and made the herbage and grass to sprout. He created man and beast and the animals of the forest, the birds of the air and the fish of the sea, and by his mouth they live and die. Surely he created thee in thy mother's womb and put thee in the breath of life, put in thee the breath of life, and reared thee and placed thee upon the royal throne of Egypt. And he will take thy breath and soul from thee and return thee to the ground whence thou wast taken. And the anger of the king was kindled at their words, and he said to them, But who amongst all the gods of nations can do this? My river is my own, and I have made it for myself. And he drove them from him, and he ordered the labor upon Israel to be more severe than it was yesterday and before. And Moses and Aaron went out from the king's presence, and they saw the children of Israel in an evil condition, for the taskmasters had made their labor exceedingly heavy. And Moses returned to the Lord and said, Why hast thou ill-treated thy people? For since I came to speak to Pharaoh, what thou didst send me for, he has exceedingly ill used the children of Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, Behold, thou wilt see with an outstretched hand and heavy plagues. Pharaoh will send the children of Israel from his land. And Moses and Aaron dwelt among their brethren, the children of Israel, in Egypt. And as for the children of Israel, the Egyptians embittered their lives with the heavy work which they imposed upon them.
Chapter 80. And at the end of 2 years, is Matt going to read? Oh, okay. Okay. And at the end of 2 years, the Lord again sent Moses to Pharaoh to bring forth the children of Israel and to send them out of the land of Egypt. And Moses went and came to the house of Pharaoh, and he spoke to him the words of the Lord who had sent him. But Pharaoh would not hearken to the voice of the Lord, and God roused his might in Egypt upon Pharaoh and his subjects. And God smote Pharaoh and his people with very great and sore plagues. And the Lord sent by the hand of Aaron and turned all of the waters of Egypt into blood, with all their streams and rivers. And when an Egyptian came to drink and draw water, he looked into his pitcher, and behold, all the water was turned into blood. And when he came to drink from his cup, the water in the cup became blood. And when a woman kneaded her dough and cooked her victuals, their appearance was turned to that of blood. And the Lord sent again and caused all their waters to bring forth frogs, and all the frogs came into the houses of the Egyptians. And when the Egyptians drank, their bellies were filled with frogs, and they danced in their bellies as they danced when in the river. And all their drinking water and cooking water turned to frogs. Also, when they lay in their beds, their perspiration bred frogs. Notwithstanding all this, the anger of the Lord did not turn from them, and his hand was stretched out against all the Egyptians to smite them with every heavy plague. And he sent and smote their dust to lice, and the lice became in Egypt to the height of 2 cubits upon the earth. The lice were also very numerous in the flesh of man and beast, and in all the inhabitants of Egypt, also upon the king and the queen, and the Lord sent the lice, and it grieved Egypt exceedingly on account of the lice. Notwithstanding this, the anger of the Lord did not turn away, and his hand was still stretched out over Egypt. And the Lord sent all kinds of beasts of the field into Egypt, and they came and destroyed all Egypt, man and beast and trees and all things that were in Egypt. And the Lord sent fiery serpents, scorpions, mice, weasels, toads, together with other creeping and dust. Flies, hornets, fleas, bugs, and gnats, each swarm according to its kind. And all reptiles and winged animals according to their kind came to Egypt and grieved the Egyptians exceedingly. And the fleas and flies came into the eyes and ears of the Egyptians. And the hornet came upon them and drove them away, and they removed from it into their inner rooms, and it pursued them. And when the Egyptians hid themselves on account of the swarm of animals, They locked their doors after them, and God ordered the Sulamith, which was in the sea, to come up and go into Egypt. And she had long arms, 10 cubits in length of the cubit of a man. And she went upon the roofs and uncovered the raftering and flooring and cut them and stretched forth her arm into the house and removed the lock and the bolt and opened the houses of Egypt. Afterward came the swarm of animals into the houses of Egypt, and the swarm of animals destroyed the Egyptians, and it grieved them exceedingly. Notwithstanding this, the anger of the Lord did not turn away from the Egyptians, and his hand was yet stretched forth against them. And God sent the pestilence, and the pestilence pervaded Egypt in the horses and asses, and in the camels, in herds of oxen and sheep, and in man. And when the Egyptians rose up early in the morning to take their cattle to pasture, they found all their cattle dead. And there remained of the cattle of the Egyptians only 1 in 10, and of the cattle belonging to Israel in Goshen, not one died. And God sent a burning inflammation in the flesh of the Egyptians, which burst their skins, and it became a severe itch in all the Egyptians, from the soles of their feet to the crowns of their heads. And many boils were in their flesh, that their flesh wasted away until they became rotten and putrid. Notwithstanding this, the anger of the Lord did not turn away, and his hand was still stretched out over all Egypt. And the Lord sent a very heavy hail, which smote their vines and broke their fruit trees and dried them up, that they fell upon them. Also every green herb became dry and perished, for a mingling fire descended amidst the hail. Therefore the hail and the fire consumed all things. Also men and beasts that were found abroad perished of the flames of the fire and of the hail, and all the young lions were exhausted. And the Lord sent and brought numerous locusts into Egypt, the Kesel, Salom, Cargol, and the Chagol, locust each of its kind, which devoured all that the hail had left remaining. Then the Egyptians rejoiced at the locusts, although they consumed the produce of the field, and they caught them in abundance and salted them for food. And the Lord turned a mighty wind of the sea, which took away all the locusts, even those that were salted, and thrust them into the Red Sea. Not one locust remained within the boundaries of Egypt. And God sent darkness upon Egypt, that the whole land of Egypt and Pathros became dark for 3 days, so that a man could not see his hand when he lifted it to his mouth. At that time died many of the people of Israel who had rebelled against the Lord, and who would not hearken to Moses and Aaron, and believed not in them that God had sent them. And who had said, "We will not go forth from Egypt, lest we perish with hunger in a desolate wilderness," and who would not hearken to the voice of Moses. And the Lord plagued them in the 3 days of darkness, and the Israelites buried them in those days, without the Egyptians knowing of them or rejoicing over them. And the darkness was very great in Egypt for 3 days, and any person who was standing when the darkness came remained standing in his place. And he that was sitting remained sitting, and he that was lying continued lying in the same state, and he that was walking remained sitting upon the ground in the same spot. And this thing happened to all the Egyptians until the darkness had passed away. And the days of darkness passed away, and the Lord sent Moses and Aaron to the children of Israel, saying, "Celebrate your feast and make your Passover, for behold, I come in the midst of the night amongst all the Egyptians, and I will smite all their firstborn, from the firstborn of a man to the firstborn of a beast. And when I see your Passover, I will pass over you." And the children of Israel did according to all that the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. Thus did they in that night. And it came to pass in the middle of the night that the Lord went forth in the midst of Egypt and smote all the firstborn of the Egyptians, from the firstborn of man to the firstborn of beast. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry throughout Egypt in that night, for there was not a house in which there was not a corpse. Also the likeness of the firstborn of Egypt, which were carved in the walls at their houses, were destroyed and fell to the ground. Even the bones of their firstborn who had died before this, and whom they had buried in their houses, were raked up by the dogs of Egypt on that night and dragged before the Egyptians and cast before them. And all the Egyptians saw this evil which had suddenly come upon them, and all the Egyptians cried out with a loud voice. And all the families of Egypt wept upon that night, each man for his son and each man for his daughter, being the firstborn. And the tumult of Egypt was heard at a distance on that night. And Bethia, the daughter of Pharaoh, went forth with the king on that night to seek Moses and Aaron in their houses. And they found them in their houses, eating and drinking and rejoicing with all Israel. And Bethia said to Moses, "Is this the reward for the good which I have done to thee, who have reared thee and stretched thee out, and thou hast brought this evil upon me and my father's house?" And Moses said to her, "Surely 10 plagues did the Lord bring upon Egypt. Did any evil accrue to thee from any of them? Did one of them affect thee?" And she said, "No." And Moses said to her, "Although thou art the firstborn to thy mother, thou shalt not die, and no evil shall reach thee in the midst of Egypt." And she said, "What advantage is it to me when I see the king, my brother, and all his household and subjects in this evil, whose firstborn perish with all the firstborn of Egypt?" And Moses said to her, "Surely thy brother and his household and subjects, the families of Egypt, would not hearken to the words of the Lord. Therefore did this evil come upon them." And Pharaoh, king of Egypt, approached Moses and Aaron and some of the children of Israel who were with them in that place, and he prayed to them, saying, "Rise up and take your brethren, all the children of Israel who are in the land, with their sheep and oxen, and all belonging to them. They shall leave nothing remaining, only pray for me to the Lord your God." And Moses said to Pharaoh, "Behold, thou art thy mother's firstborn, yet fear not, for thou wilt not die, for the Lord has commanded that thou shalt live, in order to show thee his great might and strong stretched out arm." And Pharaoh ordered the children of Israel to be sent away, and all of the Egyptians strengthened themselves to send them, for they said, "We are all perishing." And all the Egyptians sent the Israelites forth with great riches, sheep and oxen, and precious things, according to the oath of the Lord between them and our father Abraham. And the children of Israel delayed going forth at night. And when the Egyptians came to them to bring them out, they said to them, "Are we thieves that we should go forth at night?" And the children of Israel asked of the Egyptians vessels of silver and vessels of gold and garments, and the children of Israel stripped the Egyptians. And Moses hastened and rose up and went to the river of Egypt, and brought up from thence the coffin of Joseph, and took it with him. The children of Israel also brought up, each man his father's coffin with him, and each man the coffins of his tribe.
Well, that's quite the funeral procession. But let's go back to chapter 76. And I didn't get anything until at least verse 21. So if you got something before that, let's hear it. Nobody, huh? The okay, why did I want to...
Something that I just wanted to say, okay, the writings in Jasher, it's like when someone's telling a story and they have to keep backing up and say, "Oh, okay, and then this was going on during this time." And then they go for it. And then it's like, okay, and also this was going on at this time. So it's not in a perfect linear outline fashion.
Right. I find it interesting in 21, what this reminded me of. I used to spend quite a bit of time, around some homeless people, and also worked in group homes. You can hear this story all the time. Yeah, I used to be a magistrate down in Mexico, and I used to run these 400,000 acre farms, but then one day I didn't know it. I angered the local administrator or the mayor or whatever, and he was allied with the drug cartel, and they kicked me out. But now you're sitting here talking to this homeless person, and that's just kind of what I envisioned, And then what's Reuel? Now, why is his name Reuel here? But different in Scripture.
It's not.
Why?
That's real. People will get sometimes have multiple names. I really like the name Ruel. My mom had an uncle Ruel. So but that's Ruel, and then in the scriptures he's Ruel, and then he's Jethro. It's one and the same.
Okay. All right. So, but you see what I'm saying? He throws him in jail right away. What about all these homeless people that they're like, okay, that's crazy talk. Come on, we're going downtown. Anyways, that's just what came to my mind.
Another interesting thing was back before about the time that he was born, Ruel was one of the advisors to the Pharaoh to do away with the children.
Same one.
He was an advisor at the time that Moses was born.
Okay. So what about let's go to 29. Or at least that's what I have. If you got something before that, let me know.
Yep. That one was interesting.
Reminded me of, remember all these stories coming out about the cement plants? Right? Well, that's a little bit later, but this, right?
Yeah, Glenn, you're jumping to 77.
Yeah. Well, we can heal people with the blood of young people, right? I mean, they're saying that now.
Mm-hmm. Here's the crazy thing. Now look at 31. It says that they took the infants of the children from Israel from the bosoms of their mother by force. Does that mean it was like inside of them?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm reading that.
As they're breastfeeding. Yank.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, just crazy right there. 36 was my next one. Right? This goes right along with Deuteronomy, 27, 28, 29. And the Lord smote him with a bad tumor, talking about Pharaoh, and sickness at the stomach, and that plague turned to a severe boil. And we're told, right, if you abide by my commandments and statutes, then I will give you these blessings. But if you don't, then I will bring the diseases of the Egyptians upon you, and more diseases that you've never even heard of. And what do they do now? Now they're all happy. Look, we made a new scientific discovery. We can heal this disease, and we found another disease, but we'll cure that one. It's never repent and stop what you're doing. It's always keep staying in your lifestyle. Man will figure it out. So, okay. Rant. Yeah. And then I don't have anything until 57. If you got something before that.
44.
Okay.
That's harsh. That's harsh.
Yeah. Road rash.
Yeah. And
Ro-
45. Yeah. Oh.
Road.
And how would they carry him? They would have. It sounded like it took him forever to get back.
Well, not only the road rash, but the road rash accented by the weight of a horse skidding on top of you. You're
Plus
the cushion for the
sores.
horse.
Plus, you already got sores and stuff. Ew.
Yep. That horse went back to the stable and said, "Man, I would have had the worst road rash." But fortunately, I landed on top of this guy. Yeah, that would have been not pretty. Okay. Anything else before 57?
55 is weird.
Okay.
It says he was 10 years old.
He pops out 4 sons.
Yep.
What?
We've already discussed, though, how there seems to be some timing issues with Jasher, age issues.
Yeah, and some what you call child loving
Pedophiles.
Naps.
And that's why we got a ban. Anyways, so 57, this directly corresponds, in my opinion, to Revelation chapter 16, verse 1 and 2, when the vials of wrath are poured out. Those with the number of the beast get noisome, which is stinky, gross, stinky, nasty, oozy sores all over. And this is what he has here. And his flesh stank like the carcass cast upon the field in summertime during the heat of the sun.
What's
Right?
that? Revelation what?
16 verses 1 and 2. It's the first vial of wrath.
Okay.
Verse 2. And the first went and poured out his vial of wrath upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image. You ever drive past roadkill? In the
yeah,
summer?
right. I mean, the stuff that's leading into this and all the plagues of Egypt is going to be replayed out in Revelation.
Yep. Okay. Anything else for chapter 76? Let's go to 77.
Wait.
Okay. I don't have anything until 5 and 6. The what?
So before we move on, in 76, I find the end of his life. And I've noticed this in my own life, other people that were wicked, they have a horrible death. And I kind of chuckled when they said they couldn't embalm him. They had to hurry up and put him in, bury him because he was stinky. And I kind of got a chuckle because he was so nasty during his whole life. And this is how you end up at the end. Your death like kind of mirrors your life in a lot of cases.
Yep. All right. So verses 5 and 6 is where I got to first. He's describing a dwarf here. We're getting the description of a dwarf, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Can I interject here? All right. Hollywood in the movie The 10 Commandments, my all-time favorite movie, they actually kind of sort of got it right having Yul Brynner play this guy, because Yul Brynner was very short. Not as short as this guy, but This guy is short. What is it?
And history, if you look at history, it bears this out. Look at the historical.
Well, a cubit and a half tall is really short.
Was that like 3 feet?
He was deformed. He was deformed. He was broader around than he was tall, wasn't he?
So maybe instead of Napoleon complex, we should say Pharaoh complex. Man, that guy's got a real Pharaoh complex. Have you read that, GR? The Apocalypse of Abraham? Okay. So that, I don't have anything until 10 after that. Traitors, right? And he placed officers over them from amongst the children of Israel, and over the officers he placed taskmasters. So basically, it's the old, hey, we'll treat you real well if you slave drive everyone around you.
Stepping back into our own country's history, the Trail of Tears, the people that were in charge of escorting the Native Americans, most of them were half-breeds and or partial Native American themselves that were escorting these people.
Nothing new under the sun. And then, this is where I jumped ahead. Verse 16. Using the children, using the infants for building blocks. And that, the things we got coming out, about the cement plants. Right? All these new buildings they're building. What's in the mortar? What's in the concrete? What's in the cement?
I have not heard anything. I don't follow the news. Is there something that I've missed? And I apologize for losing it while I was reading this, guys. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's understandable. That. Anyways, that. We'll talk about that after we get done with this, GR. Okay, that's all I have for 77. If you guys got something else, spit it out.
You know what's weird? Why did they actually do like an 18? Why were they going along with it? Why would you, if you're sitting there crying, mortaring your son into the wall? Why? Why wouldn't you just say no and stop and don't do it? This doesn't make sense to me.
I believe, my opinion, it's like we hear all these people for many years complain about authorities and positions of power. Well, somebody ought to rise up. Well, what happens when somebody rises up? That person becomes the example, right? That's the guy that gets the SWAT teams. That's the guy that gets his house burned down. That's the guy that gets his, shot and burned to death on live news. And then the family is never employable ever again, right? Because the name is just turned to mud. We're seeing the exact same thing now, in my opinion.
Well, it says they have no compassion over the babes of the children of Israel.
Yep.
People have no compassion today on children, for sure.
A lot. There's starting to be a big cry out, though. There certainly is. We'll see how far it gets taken. Excuse me.
So this sapphire stick is very fascinating.
Okay.
Is it a? I'm wondering if it's a literal piece of sapphire in the shape of a stick, because that would be kind of delicate. I mean, was it kind of like it has to have something special about it? If this indeed are true.
Sapphire is second hardest next to diamond. Okay, so it's not that fragile. And I find it really cool because I had written in my book, I'm going inheritance, the question mark. Is that what was swapped over for the pottage of lentils along with the garment from Adam and Eve? And there were, okay, I'm going to go back to Hollywood. Okay, sometimes they put some truth out there. In the movie that was made, The Bible, okay, it had George C. Scott playing Abraham, and it shows him handing this staff to Isaac as a boy, when he's like a coming of age or whatever, and he's reciting his lineage, and he's got this staff that he is giving to Isaac, okay, and I'm like, okay, there is something there. Okay, yeah, the movie's not scripture, but I find it interesting that that little tidbit was put in there with this staff with names written on it. Okay. But anyway, that's it.
Right. And so, what kind of got me is like nobody's ever really sure about the color, the right blue color that Abba wanted them to use in the temples and all, what color blue was it? Sapphire. It's got to be sapphire blue. I
think so. The nice, brilliant, bright blue. That. What? Yeah, that came to my mind also. Where did the legend of King Arthur come from?
Yes, and even in some of the Sumerian tales, there is this sword in the stone type of thing.
Now, there's a film documentary on the same book, a book by the same name, but The Tales of Glastonbury by E. Raymond Capt. But the book covers a lot more details about certain things. And it gets very interesting into the fact that when the Roman Catholic, the Catholic monks got there, they already found Christianity to the British Isles. And there were a couple of tombs in what they think was near the house of Mary, right? That was the mother of Jesus. There was a number of tombs, and some of them, or one of them, was like 8 feet tall, the skeleton. It was a lot. It's real interesting. Get the book. Read it. Okay. Anything else for this chapter? Okay, let's go to 78. That 78. Huh. He said it was raining there, so I wonder if he just got zapped. I don't know if you guys could hear the thunder here. No? Okay. So 78. I didn't take any notes for this, so whatever you got, talk to me. Talk to me. It's a very short chapter, huh? Why do you think Moses listened to his father-in-law to not circumcise the firstborn?
Oh, it tells us.
No opinions on that?
Doesn't it tell us in the next chapter?
I figured it was because out of respect, since he was kind of like residing in his tent, respecting the elder. I don't know.
Okay. I can see that. Honoring his father-in-law. Maybe he also, in that culture, it was the eldest son is kind of dedicated to one of the grandparents. It's not uncommon. Okay, so they're getting oppressed more and more. Let's go to 79. And what do you got? We got Moses going up to the unburning bush. It was a bush on fire, but it wasn't consumed. The burning bush. No, it's the unburning bush.
It was burning, but not really. And I didn't have anything till 27. This is interesting that we use that symbol for Janus and Jambres this day.
Yep. The pillars.
These characters had quite a history with Moses, going, sporadically in Egypt. And then, okay, this is the only book that identifies who Janus and Jambres was outside of 2 Timothy 3:8.
Yep. So where did Paul get that information? Yeah. Interesting. So if Zipporah circumcises their son, and then Abba, sends Aaron out to meet Moses, and Aaron's like, send your wife and kids back. So he does. Kind of interesting. There's a little more detail there compared to Exodus, the book of Exodus, when it's like, here she is, and then no more.
And then they join up with them.
Yep.
Because all of a sudden they're back with them.
Well, it's the way it works sometimes. Okay, so, and then we have the showdown of the magicians, and this goes into a little bit more than that. I found it interesting in 51. The Pharaoh says, but who amongst all the gods of nations can do this? And it goes very well to what I believe we're seeing unfold now. And I think it was Michael Heiser was talking about, used to be the 70 gods, right? One over each nation, over each tongue. All power and all authority was given to Christ upon the resurrection. It's all his. It was all united under one. So what have we been working on the past few decades? They're getting everybody all ruffled up about a one world government. And now we're seeing the rise of patriotism. And I'm beginning to believe more and more that that is the great lie and deception. No, we're all each our own nation. Rise up. Rise up. We're going to go gather together to battle. Okay, anyways. Ranting.
Okay. Okay, I have something, okay, that I had underlined in 48 was for from the days of our going down to Egypt. I was just talking about going to sacrifice to the Father, okay, and worship. This is establishing the fact that this was, once again, they knew the instructions, they knew the law, they knew the feast days. They just had not been practicing them. This was not something new to them, but they had not been practicing since they were, a couple of generations into Egypt.
Well, look at the United States. They traded Washington's birthday and Lincoln's birthday for Cinco de Mayo. That not an official paid holiday, but you get my drift, right? Start adopting the customs of other peoples. Oh, wait. Okay, so then we got this, starts the plagues, and then in 80, they really get cranked up. And we get, this makes a little bit, I'm Italian today. It makes a bit more sense that, I have to talk with my hands, makes a bit more sense that all the creatures, not just the frogs, but the frogs were the actual curse, I think. But look at how when a city is established, the wildlife starts coming back in and adapting. And people get all freaked out. Oh, there's a bear in the middle of town. Or a bobcat. Or a puma.
Or turkeys. I've seen some turkeys that get kind of vicious towards people's cars, and they're trapped in their cars.
That's all fun. So that anything else jumping out to you from these plagues? Yeah, desert winds.
Ooh, the frogs dancing in your belly. that really creeped me out.
So, Sulanith, a monster in the sea described as being ordered by God to come up and go into Egypt. And she had long arms, 10 cubits in length.
Sounds like a giant squid.
Well, yeah. Could be. It'd make a great 1950s science fiction movie.
Well, with that beak, you would be able to tear it open and cut stuff. Just saying.
I wonder if that's something similar to Leviathan.
I don't think it is.
Okay.
Oops. But who knows? That I saw somebody that had really put a lot of research into it. I think it was David Carrico. And the creature had more description in it. It sounded like a very super tall humanoidish thing. I don't know. And I don't know if what he had was an accurate description or not. Nah. Anyways, what else do we have for 80? Something else? I'll tell you what I thought was pretty interesting. Even the images of the firstborn were destroyed. Could that be what happened to the Sphinx?
Okay, what I found interesting is in number 37, that at that time died many of the people of Israel who had rebelled against the Lord and who would not hearken to Moses and Aaron and believed not in them that God had sent them. Okay, so we've gotten this told that that all Israel followed out. Well, obviously there were some that were rebelling while they were in Egypt, and they suffered consequences along with the Egyptians.
Now, what is that? What does that, because you were commenting that these plagues of Egypt were seeing repeated in Revelation. What does that say when we get to Revelation 18:4, and we're told, "Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins or her plagues"?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can stay here if I only take a little bit.
What happened is going to happen again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That which was shall be again. Who didn't switch it? Okay, there we go. Chapter 80.
So everybody that was walking when the 3 days of darkness came on, did they just walk in place for 3 days?
Sit there.
Or sit? Right.
So country fun, that if you're talking about the Israelites, the Hebrews taking their stuff, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be that too. Right? Or it could be like we saw with the kings when Abraham said, "It's my sister. It's my sister." And then they were like, no, here, take all this gold, this silver, just get out. Go
Pay
away.
them to leave. You go now before we all die, take our stuff.
Yep.
Okay, back when you were talking about, the sitting or remaining sitting and, whatever, it's almost like where it says in the scripture, okay, I don't know which book, I can't do chapter and verse, but it says, let him who is sinning, continue sinning, let him who is, being righteous, continue being righteous. I mean, what was that in? I can't remember, but it's somewhere in the scriptures. Let the one who's going apostate, let them remain that way.
I know what you're talking about, but I can't think of where it is. Can't think of it. And that. So that, and it's interesting because Batia going to Moses during the Passover, that was in the movie The Ten Commandments. And you talking about the Bible movie, and this reminded me of the movie The Ten Commandments. I'm thinking that they probably drew a lot from the book of Jasher in both of those movies. Maybe not. That is, Miss Camacho is asking, was it the book of Ecclesiastes that says that? Don't know. You're Italian too? Ah, don't know. Okay. Quit making fun of Italian people.
I'm not real good on book, chapter, verse, and my only, the only thing that keeps me from totally destroying myself over it is like when Christ or the disciples were reciting scripture, they didn't quote book, chapter, verse either. They just said it.
So do you think someone made that up when Paul said, in the scroll of Isaiah, scroll 3, unroll number 29? Someone made that up? Yeah. No, they copied it wrong. It's not scroll 3, it's scroll 2.
10th column.
Okay, anything else for 80? Okay. Thank you for reading, Glenna and Lynn and Matt and everybody for joining us today. Today was awesome. Really glad you all joined us today. Matt, if this helped you, please like, share, subscribe. And that's a thumbs up thing underneath the video.
Okay, and my apologies to Matthew. I thought maybe he was already gone or his friend was there, and that's why I went ahead and read, because I he had said something about going to be leaving early. So I thought I was doing a favor. Sorry, Matthew.
You did me a favor. Okay, so everyone, have a great day of rest. If it's raining where you are, enjoy it. Soak it up. I love you all. We'll talk very soon. Bye.